Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of big Finnish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 3rd of July, 2019, we are taking a look at the penultimate story for the Key to Time arc with The Power of Kroll, Robert Holmes's final Tom Baker story. Starting with part 1. Now, the first episode of The Power of Kroll is... The first thing that'll start you is that as soon as the credits end of the first of the opening credits, the direction is weird. There's no sort of we're trying to establish anything. It's just like it thinks an establishing shot is a almost stationary shot of characters doing things, with no music over it. This is directed by Norman Stewart, who directed Underworld. So you probably should get an idea of the quality of director that we're using here in this specific adventure. But sadly, what's quite sad is that the story itself, is just... We start out, oddly enough, with an okay plot. Very political here. Oddly enough, the politics are interesting. It's an interesting sort of message. This is a story where you have, it's very much an anti-colonial, pro indigenous rights sort of thing. You have the Swampies, who are the green inhabitants of this moon. It's a moon of Delta Magna, where there's a refinery, which I guess is it's never... I think it's like they're taking methane. It's one of those interesting little ideas where you have where you actually have the story as the story is written as it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting and good idea. The plot could possibly work. One of the biggest issues here is that the episode doesn't do much. It gets the Doctor and Romana separated on the moon. The moon, which is a giant swamp. The location footage is actually really, really nice. They're in an actual swamp, a swamp somewhere in the UK, which looks great. But what's kind of sad is that instead of the the inside stuff, the inside the refinery, sadly, looks really cheap. It isn't nearly as good looking as the exterior shots, which is interesting because this is, I think, the first story where this is the only, unlike Underworld, which was all studio bound. and oddly enough had a really decent spaceship set. Um, this one just it doesn't quite work. It's it's again it's a pretty weak sort of plot here. It's one where you have you have characters. You have this Rome jot. Like the big thing that Romana does is she gets captured and is going to be sacrificed to Kroll, which is the Swampy's god. The Swampies themselves, they're people with like weird hair painted green. That's what they are for aliens, which isn't really the most interesting alien look. Like it looks genuinely cheap. Like, oh, this is our great idea. We're doing so well with this um with this little um with this sort of idea. It's also um you have you have some nice subtext here where you have the um you have an organization off screen uh you know uh Tate Tate trying to be like fight for their rights while um the doctor is um the doctor is basically attempting to uh get everything put together uh in what is basically a full length story. It's one of those. It could be really, 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 really good here. Like it could be a really really good sort of subtext, kind of just one of those. Hey, we had a um we have an idea for a story, um and we built the story around that. It could have been really really good, but sadly it's a story overall that's not that interesting. It's more of a we built an average. It ends with a sacrifice of Romana, which is a decent cliffhanger, and I kind of the reveal that what Kroll looks like. He's not really, it's not really one of the greatest sort of not one of the greatest plots. It's honestly it's actually quite boring. um it's and it's just a dull start. You have potential here, so you could, and this is being a Robert Holmes script, there is characters like Rome Dot is a fun character, the gun runner, but there just isn't much here that finishes. Like it's sort of like, we have this idea, so we didn't there just isn't much done with the actual idea of the story. So overall, I'm going to give The Power of Kroll Part 1 a 5 out of 10. It is the 4th of July 2019, and I just finished watching Part 2 of The Power of Kroll, which is, well, the story's taken a dive, is the best way to put it. It's the first episode was okay. This one is, I have very little to say about it. One of the big reveals here early on is that Kroll is a giant squid. After they reveal the Kroll that they were sacrificing Romana to was a dude in a suit, a swampy in a suit, which is just, I'm sorry, it's a weird, it is a weird story here. It's one where there isn't much here. It's mostly dull. Like even this story, there is very little. Um, there's actually very little here for really the story to sustain itself, which is odd because this is still one of a story written by Robert Holmes, generally thought to be one of the best genuinely one of my favorite writers. This is perhaps, and this is again, this what is episode. It's weak. The second episode has very little happen. There's a lot of, talk of like what's going on at the refinery. Like the big cliffhanger is a tentacle drags a crew member to his death. Like we have the big reveal of Kroll waking up like in the actual giant squid in the 80s that it wakes up every 200 years and this is his fourth reawakening. There's the nice idea is you get some nice background that the Swampies were from Delta Magna but then shipped off, so they're not even natives, sort of really trying to drive home messages of anti-colonialism. And honestly, that's the message here of anti-colonialism is the only interesting aspect here, because like many stories, this is an episode where the Doctor and Romana, they try to escape, they get recaptured, while people at the refinery talk about like, what are the Sons of Earth doing, and then suddenly the people Rome Dot, the gun runner character, gets, he's basically captured by the Swampies, and quote unquote betrayed by them. Basically, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is what the this is what the story does. It does here is our new sort of here is a new sort of story, ideas here. There really isn't this is a story where there really isn't much here. It's a lot of running around. It looks nice. It looks kind of quote unquote. It looks kind of pretty, but it's not really that good of an episode. It really feels like like it's like it's one that's just like we did it to sort of, we're moving the plot along. It doesn't feel like there's actually really anywhere for the story to go. It's just like, we have we have just a story here. It's not really being a good story. It's sort of there. I mean, overall, there's some good ideas here. Again, the politics are good. It's just, as an episode, it's boring. Like, Mary Tam's obviously trying. John Leeson shows up. It turns out he's a character here. Seems to be trying his hardest to give the material something, but there's not really much there. And there's some, a lot of it's like political machinations of building, like, what could be in the refinery? What could we be doing? Could Kroll be the source of methane? Overall, it's just not very good. So overall, I'm going to give The Power of Kroll Part 2 a 3 out of 10. It is the 5th of July, 2019, and I just finished watching Part 3 of The Power of Kroll, which is sadly the weakest episode yet. Once again, it's an episode that is just mainly it's taking its time to go places, and it's not But the problem is it's not going anywhere all that interesting. It's just, oh, look, we have characters built up around this whole, oh, we're workers, these indigenous people's rights. You have the big reveal that one of the main human villains is the leader of the refinery who is just trying to set up the Swampies, which, okay, the problem with that is they act like it's a twist. It's not. It's most definitely just one of those. It's one of those, like, oh, this is just a standard twist. We aren't doing anything interesting with the actual. We're not doing anything with the actual plot point. It's just like, oh, this is the plot point we're going with, so enjoy it while you can, because it's a plot point. You have a lot of stuff about the idea that the possibility that Kroll might have either might have swallowed the fifth segment of the Key to Time, which brings the Key to Time back into it. Honestly, within the second episode, I don't think the Key to Time was mentioned once. The best scene in this episode is the scene where the long sequence where the Doctor and Romana and Rome Dutt get tied up. One of the big cliffhanger here is Kroll rising up to the surface and dragging a Swampy to its death, because we're getting to the big let's have Kroll rampage. There's a lot of rampaging Kroll here. That's basically where you get a lot of the story built around this giant alien. What you really notice is that this is an episode. The episode's only 21 minutes long, nearly 22 minutes. It's one of those really sort of works. It's one where you just you have very little. It's not a very good episode. Like, the props for Kroll, like the giant squid itself, like the squid itself is fine, but the tentacles that we see, when we see tentacles, it's trying to do this giant horror, this giant horror episode type thing that's attacking people, and it's really not. It really just doesn't work well, because it looks cheap. It's also just one of those. It's one of those stories where you can kind of feel the idea that this is meant. Well, you're meant to take. When you're meant to take it kind of seriously, it's trying to take itself seriously. It just fails on that count, because instead of being a serious piece about a giant squid and, I guess, environmentalism, it's mainly just, oh, we're building up the episode, let's keep building, come on, keep going, keep getting everything put together, get the story going, and then we're building to nothing. Like, the idea is that some of the idea is that Kroll isn't a god. There's that, like, the entire, oh, this is a cult that worships an actual god is wrong. But it doesn't do anything. It's just, let's have the Doctor, Romana, and Rome Dutt captured. And oddly enough, the script itself is dull. It's not a good, fun script. It's not up to Robert Holmes' usual standard for these types of scripts. It's very much plotting, and it's a part 3 itself. It's a lot of padding. it's not at all a really, really good story. So overall, I'm going to give The Power of Kroll Part 3 a 2 out of 10. It is the 6th of July 2019, and I just finished watching Part 4 of The Power of Kroll, the concluding episode. And once again, this isn't a good episode. It's just as good as episode 3, and that's mainly because, let's be honest, Tom Baker and Mary Tam are the best thing to watch in this episode. And they were the best things to watch just in this story as a whole. The Doctor and Romana have built up great chemistry throughout this season of the show. They've built up a rapport with each other. You can really tell the Doctor and Romana as characters have created this relationship where they both care about each other. You also have an over-the-top villain, Thrawn, who has been slowly going more megalomaniacal because he's the big racist guy, the big racist character who genuinely could have maybe been a bit more interesting if we actually got some of his motivations, because it's outside of greed, like what's drawn him to greed. It's just like, no, he's greedy. He's really, really greedy, and that's his character. And as a character, that is it's just lacking in any sort of real emotional depth for a character. Whereas, and of course, a lot of this episode is the big Kroll destroys everything, and the day is saved about 15 minutes into the episode, where the Doctor uses the tracer, and bam, Kroll itself was the segment of the key to time, which, let's be honest, that could have been done a lot more. That could have been done a lot better. It was set up okay in the first episode that, there was the key to time was below them, and massive, that the segment, but honestly, this episode feels rushed. There's like 5 to 7 minutes left after the Kroll is defeated. Basically be like, the base was set to self-destruct because we need to destroy the monster. So the Doctor has to fix that last minute because, we needed padding. There's just that's the problem with this episode. There is a lot of padding here, and the padding is mostly unnecessary. It's really just there to be it's because we needed to have an entire episode pretty much devoted to the final episode, because we had to do 4 episodes because you had the episode counts. It's not an episode that I'd even recommend you watching, honestly. This is a story that's really skippable. Kroll is a nice idea. Characters get killed off, which is, nice and fun, and it ends in a dark. It ends kind of dark. Like there's kind of a darkness to the end of this story, even though that quote unquote darkness doesn't really go anywhere. It's just remember we have dark characters and morally ambiguous. We have a morally ambiguous plot, something that other episodes have, done well. And the direction is poor. The monster itself, Kroll, is really cheap. The tentacles really don't work. It's like, it has hundreds of tentacles. You can see maybe 4 on the screen at one time, because that's all that's all the prop department did. Like, don't, adapt your script to when you see what the actual prop department can do. It's great to write something with hundreds of tentacles, but when you can only really have 4 or 5, it's not good enough. Now, it's just also there just isn't much here of an actual villain, and there isn't much here for an actual story. It's one of Robert Holmes', which is it's a shame, because Robert Holmes usually writes really, really well. It's just a shame that now he really didn't have. It's almost like he didn't have it in him. He didn't know really what he wanted to do with Kroll. What did he want to do with the story itself? Did he want to build everything up? Or did he just sort of want everything to fall down? It's overall just a weak... and overall, it's a weaker story. It's one that, you don't get nearly as much, good stuff here. So overall, I'm going to give The Power of Kroll Part 4 a 2 out of 10. And we add up the scores to give The Power of Kroll a final score of 3 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we finish The Key to Time with the big finale in The Armageddon Factor.